Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Edith Macker. I'm Environment Director for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and I am glad to be here. I'm going to be filling in for Mayor Kevin Burns, our chairman, who is running a little bit late today. He will be joining us, but I am so grateful to have all of you here for this topic on code enforcement and adoption for sustainability. It's really important topic, and we're so glad to have a diverse representation from the municipalities participating in this call. Some of our regulars, as well as some new folks here for the conversation. We have a lot of speakers today. We also have a lot of Zoom poll questions. So please stick with us and pay attention. We really need your dialogue on this. This is one of those committees where we're both presenting information, but we really need feedback and dialogue to help maybe shape future programs. So please stick with us. The codes that govern the design and construction of buildings impact the efficient and resilient performance of buildings for decades to come. As technology changes, like energy storage, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and as new information about resilience and efficiency related to climate information and building performance, as this information becomes available, codes must change as well. And updates and improvements to codes involve dedicated organizations that engage stakeholders and experts. These are third-party organizations that work at multiple levels. They work at the international level, the national level, or the state level, like the Illinois Capital Development Board. Yet codes enforcement occurs exclusively at the local level. So this is the job of municipalities. And sometimes municipalities are also responsible for the adoption through municipal action. Municipalities and property owners benefit when current versions of building and electrical codes are enforced. Yet changing our complex building permitting and inspection processes for these multiple complex and ever-changing codes presents a significant challenge for local government. Municipalities usually want to assert local control in decision-making, but we also like to see consistency across jurisdictions. Not surprisingly, the construction industry likes consistency too. So we have these two opposing sometimes interests and a lot of codes that we need to get our arms around. So in recent years, especially since CJAR, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, authorized stretch codes, advocates have become increasingly interested in municipal code processes. So these processes are elevated, and we have a lot more organizations that want to be helpful. So today's meeting, we're going to dig into the complex processes of code development and enforcement. We've got stakeholders here who are on the sidelines willing to help, some that are involved deep in the adoption and technical assistance, and they're going to join us for the discussion and share their perspectives, as well as some very new resources that are evolving. We'll start with our own Cheryl Scott, who's the Senior Sustainability Specialist at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, who's going to give an overview of the issue, and then we'll turn to guest speakers. Cheryl?
Thanks, Edith. And just to confirm that you can see the correct presentation view.
Looks great.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I'll just be giving a quick overview of the codes to frame the issue and to go over some of the acronyms that those in the building department are probably familiar with, but we have others on the call who may not be familiar with all of the acronyms involved. So there are codes that municipalities choose to adopt, and some of those are from the International Code Council, the IRC, the International Residential Code, which covers various aspects of buildings for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses up to 3 stories. And there's also the IBC, or the International Building Code, which applies to other buildings that are not covered by the IRC. For these codes, there's a new one developed every 3 years through the ICC code development process, and they're developed through a review of proposed changes submitted by code enforcement officials, industry reps, design professionals, and other stakeholders. The code cycles for these codes are 2024, 2021, and so on. And we have found that there's at least one community may still be using the 2023 version of the code. And We've seen some others on 2006. And just for reference, in 2000, the ICC first published the first IBC and IRC. And so just to kind of make the discussion a little bit more fun, we just thought we'd see what was going on in 2003 when some were, adopting this code. So MySpace launched, there were hit movies like the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Wicked was debuting on Broadway, which we all know now is in movie form for part one is on streaming. And apparently this hairstyle was the rage, according to one magazine. And just to get into some other codes that municipalities can choose to adopt, we have the NEC, the National Electrical Code, which the National Fire Protection Association creates. And you'll notice that that's different from the ICC, which creates the I codes. So you'll see that the years are slightly different. It's 2023, 2020, and so on, whereas the ICC codes on the previous slide were 2024, 2021. And the NEC is the benchmark for safe electrical design, installation, and inspection to protect people and property from electrical hazards. We did find at least one community that we believe may be using the 1996 NEC, but we've seen some others that are on 2005 or some of those earlier years of the code. So just to kind of some fun facts about what was going on when that was coming out, we had the Bulls won their 4th championship at the time, and they would go on to win more. People were doing the Macarena that year. We had the first DVD release, and the Rachel haircut was still pretty popular, even though it debuted the year before. So when looking across the nation, we have 17 states in beige that are following the 2023 NEC, and we've got the 21 in purple that are following the 2020 NEC. And you'll notice that Illinois and 3 other states, they actually allow the counties and municipalities to choose to adopt that, which is why we have some communities that might be on, early 2000s or even the late 90s version of the NEC. And now to move on to codes that municipalities enforce. The International Energy Conservation Code addresses energy efficiency and aims to reduce pollution, moderate peak energy demand, and protect the environment. It's developed by the ICC every 3 years, so it's on those same code cycles as the IRC and the IBC. It's 2024, 2021, and so on. And the process for developing the code in Illinois is first the ICC comes out with the IECC, and the Illinois Energy Conservation Advisory Council reviews proposed amendments that are submitted and votes to accept or reject them. The council then presents the recommendations to the Illinois Capital Development Board. The Capital Development Board will vote on those recommendations, and then once they approve them, it goes to JCAR, or the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. And after JCAR approves the recommendations, then all new residential and commercial buildings must follow the Illinois Energy Conservation Code. And you'll notice throughout this whole process, there's many opportunities for public comments as well. There is also some confusion about the process, but we'll have speakers that will come up later in the meeting and they'll discuss the IECC in a little more detail, and they can address questions that you might have about the process. So just to look across the nation, we can see that Illinois is a leader. There's a few other states, California and Washington, that are on the most recent IECC for residential buildings. And then when looking across the nation at commercial buildings, we can see Illinois is also a leader on one of the latest IECCs. And just to kind of just set up a little bit more about what our speakers will be covering, there are consequences for using the outdated codes. It can be a safety concern, and some of the new technologies we're seeing, like EV chargers and energy storage, aren't covered at all in some of those older codes. So our speakers will discuss the costs and benefits of updating to the latest codes. Some of the other things that we'll consider during the meeting is who is tracking the status of adoption for each community. And we'll hear about how a recent law has kind of helped to make that more possible. And we'll also consider who's tracking code enforcement of these codes. So that was just a brief overview to kind of set the stage for what's to come. And I did also just want to mention that there are many codes that municipalities can or enforce, but we'll only be covering a few at today's meetings because we only do have 90 minutes, so we can't cover all of them today. So thank you, and then I'll turn it back to Edith.
Thank you, Cheryl. We do have our first Zoom poll question. So again, we're going to work you pretty hard today. So if you wanted to launch the first one, but just looking at Cheryl's timing on the codes, it appears that there is codes always under development, and that most years there's an update. Also very confusing how many organizations are involved. So if you we're just testing your understanding here. What is your understanding of codes that must be adopted by municipalities? There's no wrong answer here. That's why we gave you, I don't know. So we can understand that this is confusing, and of course not all housed in one department, and stakeholders in a municipality may not be in charge of this. So. Any of our speakers want to comment on the results? We'll leave that open for a second. Okay, thank you. We can end that poll and move on. And again, we have a really large audience today, so please feel free to use the chat for comments or questions. We want to make sure everybody gets a chance to present and speak, but if you have any questions that should be addressed, we've got a ton of experts here to help out. So Cheryl mentioned that there is a new law to help track code adoption. And with us, so one solution to get municipalities to current building and residential codes, we have Matt Paul from the Illinois Capital Development Board. Matt is a technical specialist at Illinois Capital Development Board. Matt? Proceed.
Here we go. Hopefully my screen's sharing okay for everybody. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Paul. I'm with the Illinois Capital Development Board. I'm a senior technical specialist, and I work with building codes and regulation inquiries. So if you've got any questions, I'll be the guy that answers the phone or the email for you. Today, we're basically going to cover what happened with statutes and public acts within the state of Illinois within the past couple of years. In the past, most municipalities and counties were allowed to adopt codes of their choosing. They simply needed to report to us. However, we had Senate Bill 2368 came up, and in that initial version of that, there was an attempt to create a statewide building code. Illinois is somewhat unique in that we do not technically have statewide building codes. This was an act or a Senate bill to try and achieve that goal. We were going to set the IBC for commercial buildings and the IRC for residential buildings. However, that Senate bill was revised, and what came out of that is Public Act 103-0510. And that Public Act amended the Capital Development Board Act and the Illinois Residential Building Code Act. And it amended a couple sections of each of those two pre-existing acts. What it essentially did was created what we're terming statewide baseline building codes. What that does is it essentially allows municipalities to still have some leeway in what they adopt, but we like to try and have additions of codes and codes that are based on model codes, which would be basically the IBC. There are some other versions of building codes out there. NFPA also has one, but based on a model code and somewhat recent. That's what I always tell people is we're not necessarily holding you down and saying you have to have the most current one in most circumstances, but we do like for you to have a somewhat recent one. We do have some municipalities throughout the state who have codes dating back to 1955 at least. And so we're trying to get municipalities like that to kind of come up to date and get some current codes so that we're all working on something that can be enforced in a somewhat uniform fashion. So the Capital Development Board Act is the main one that we'll be discussing today. And just to kind of go over a few of different circumstances that we have here. So there's a whole lot of fun language within these acts. We try to We try to summarize this as best we can on our website into 5 categories. Basically, that would be commercial buildings within municipalities that have adopted the code, commercial buildings and municipalities that have not adopted codes, and state buildings. And then we go into 3 versions of residential codes, and that has to deal with when a new residence is built, how the contract is signed, and whether or not codes are adopted locally. So where we ended up was with these baseline codes, and that's kind of what this first portion of this slide is covering. And this came into effect at the beginning of this year, January 1st of 2025. We like to see the structural design of buildings regulated in a way that is at least as stringent as the IBC. We like to see existing commercial buildings have their structural design regulated in a way that is at least as stringent as the International Existing Building Code, or IEBC. And lastly, we like to see the structural design of residential buildings, new residential buildings, regulated at least as stringent as the IRC, or International Residential Code. And then the additions for those are typically the current edition or an edition published within the previous 9 calendar years. That gets goofy. Most of the time there are 3 editions that can be active. There are certain years where 4 editions are active and compliant. We'll go over some of those editions in another slide here. If a municipality does not adopt codes, or if a municipality has codes that are adopted that are not compliant with these requirements, then they are considered a non-building code jurisdiction. And that's when a whole nother slew of code requirements comes into play. So one of the big key differences here is that if your municipality has adopted codes that comply with all those structural design requirements and meets those baseline requirements, those are really it in terms of the required adoptions at a local level. If they do not, if a municipality does not meet those requirements or has not adopted codes, then we have the requirements for several other codes to come into play, one of which would be that National Electric Code, and that would be the current or most recent preceding editions. Later on, I'll cover this, but I'll clarify now. Municipalities and counties are not required by state statute to adopt these codes. You are allowed to not adopt anything and basically go back to those baseline codes and consider yourself a non-building code jurisdiction. So within the Illinois Residential Building Code Act, this one doesn't actually regulate how municipalities and counties adopt residential building codes. What it does is it regulates how a contract is established and what a residential building, a new residential building, so 1 or 2 family dwellings, what codes they would need to comply with. Basically, it typically comes down to the current or most recent preceding edition of the IRC, unless you go with whatever's adopted locally. And you can pick within 100 miles of the location of the home, typically. That one also gets a little goofy. If there's no code in the contract, then the most current IRC applies. Most of this comes into play if a residence is built and there's a disagreement between the contractor and the homeowner. We go back and look at their contract to say, what did you guys call out in the contract? Did what you call out comply? If it doesn't, then we go to this current IRC. So what about other codes? This is just a summary of some of the other codes that will likely apply in your jurisdiction. Some of these can be adopted. Some of these are statewide and may apply whether they are adopted or not. I know there's going to be a lot of discussion about energy codes today. We do have a statewide energy code, the Illinois Energy Conservation Code 2021 edition, which is based on the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code with modifications. We also have the commercial stretch code and the residential stretch code, which can be adopted by municipalities and goes above and beyond that 2021 ILECC. The Illinois Plumbing Code, 2014 edition applies statewide. Municipalities are allowed to adopt that and make amendments as long as it is approved by the Illinois Department of Public Health. And the Illinois Accessibility Code 2018 edition also applies in all jurisdictions. Municipalities are allowed to go above and beyond that code with local amendments if they'd like. The NFPA 101, which is the Life Safety Code, comes out of some of the state fire marshal statutes. And for the most part, the state fire marshal recommends at least the 2015 edition. If you're a home rule unit, you are allowed to adopt different versions of that. But for the most part, we see everybody on 2015 or newer. So that's a lot of information to digest. How do we come back to this? We have a website, and on our website, we have a whole page dedicated to building codes and regulations. As you can see across the top here, we've got a little band up there. If you go over to Illinois Codes, there is then a drop down, and you can select building codes and regulations, and that brings you to this web page. I'll cruise through that here in just a second and show you guys some of what we have to offer on that. So this page kind of goes through the summaries and some of those different circumstances. Like I said, commercial buildings and jurisdictions that have not adopted building codes, commercial buildings and jurisdictions that have adopted building codes. So we kind of have a summary of the codes that would likely apply and some of the statutory references for those. So if you want to look into some of the great legal mumbo jumbo that comes alongside all of this stuff, you can find that if you'd like. Our 3 residential circumstances. And then at the bottom here, this is the key thing that I think will be important and beneficial for everybody on the call today. And that's our county and municipal code reporting form and our building code directory. Illinois Municipal Code Directory, which summarizes the codes that have been reported to CDB for every municipality and county within the state. If you have not gotten on there, if you are a representative of a municipality or county and you have not gotten on there to report your codes, I'm your guy you need to report to, and you should have done that back in January. So jumping back into our slides here. Like I said, this is a summary of some of those different circumstances. I'm not going to bore you guys with too much of that today. The big thing I will point out is basically starting January 1st of this year, we had our statewide baseline building codes come into play. And again, that would be the International Building Code, Existing Building Code, and Residential Code. As those baseline, you need to be at least as stringent for the structural design of buildings. If you need to get a hold of me, my email address is there. We'll have it again at the end here in a second. So in terms of code reporting, what you need to report to the Capital Development Board. That Capital Development Board Act requires that our agency basically maintains this database. We simply take the information that is reported to us and make it publicly available to everyone within the state or whoever. You are required to report to us. Municipalities and counties are required to report to us. You should have reported to us last June what codes you had adopted. By January of this year, you should have adopted current codes based on some of those baseline standards. And if you hadn't, then you may be considered a non-building code jurisdiction today and as of January 1st. If you report and there's any questions or concerns about what you've reported to us, I will usually follow up with an email kind of summarizing, hey, sir, here's some of the issues we've seen. Maybe you've got an old edition of something. Typically, we don't get into what local amendments have been made. But if I do get in there and I start looking through your municipal code and I see like maybe you've adopted the IBC, but you've excluded the portions of it that reference the existing building code, we may make a comment about that. And then lastly, I'll point out that when you do make code changes, you have 30 days. And basically that's just enough time for us to make a public announcement that you are in the process of changing codes. So if you were to adopt something at like a local level and your board has approved it or your alder people have approved it, typically we need to know that day that it gets approved, and then it needs to not go into effect until 30 days after you have notified us. So you go into our code reporting form, you make your notification to us that, hey, we're going from like the 2015 IBC to the 2021, okay? We'll make that information available on our directory. We'll indicate the effective date of that, And then 30 days from there, we'll change everything out. It will go to the 2021 code only. Let's see here. We've highlighted this. So we've got our code reporting form on there. One of the other things I'll point out here is building codes and regulations frequently ask questions. Believe it or not, we do get quite a few questions. And I'll point out that we have these kind of divided up into different sections here. So we've got a portion dedicated to residential codes, the plumbing code, energy codes, accessibility codes, just some general questions. And then lastly down here, this is going to be probably most impactful for most of the people on the call, which is some of our questions regarding the municipal and county reporting questions. So some of those that come up are going to be, like I said, the first one is, are we required to report? And the answer, or adopt, and the answer is no, you're not required to adopt. If you do adopt, you need to meet those baseline requirements. If you don't adopt, you'll be considered a non-building code jurisdiction, and the baselines kick in at a state level anyways, okay? Basically, that comes down to, do you want to tell someone in your municipality exactly which edition and exactly what code requirements they need to have? Sorry. And how do you comply with this act? That's one of the main questions. Municipalities just need to know, what do we need to do? You need to report to us what codes you have adopted, if you have anything adopted. If you don't have anything adopted, you still need to report that to us. The most common approach to fully complying with that CDB Act is to adopt the IBC, the IEBC, and the IRC. You are not required to adopt those model codes as long as whatever else you adopt regulates the structural design in a way that is at least as stringent. Currently, as of today's date, the additions of those codes that are compliant with the statute would be the 2018, 2021, and 2024 editions. 2024 would be the current and most recent edition. Those other two fall into that category of within the preceding 9 years. So that's a whole lot of information that I hopefully didn't throw at you too quickly there. I'm not sure where my time's at, but we do recommend that you go and check out our website. Like I said, that's one page. It's all about the building codes. And then we've got some links at the bottom there for you to take a look at. I'll also showcase just what our directory looks like here. So typically you would go into our building codes page, you would click on this Illinois Municipal Code directory, that brings you here, and then you would pull up, let's think of a good one here. You would search by the name of the municipality, you can click on the right over there, and then you get to view details. We've got the website for the municipality, we've got some code official contact as long as that has been provided to us, and then we've got a list of the codes that have been adopted, the effective date, and the last date it was updated. So we've got a whole list here where they've got the IBC, they've got the existing building code, they've got the IRC, and then as you can see, they have a lot of other codes that they have adopted that they've reported to us. We note the year in addition, and lastly, we simply notify if there's a yes or no of whether or not local amendments might apply. So let's say you've adopted the IBC or the IRC, but there's this particular code section that you don't like and you don't want in your municipality. As long as that doesn't affect the structural design, you're able to make amendments to that. And instead of us reporting everybody's amendments that they might have, we simply indicate, yes, there may be local amendments, or no, there are not. And in that case, if it's a yes, we would simply direct them to the local municipality to answer any questions about those local amendments. When you go to report to us, again, on that web page, we have up here, county and municipal code reporting form, okay? And of course, I don't have that one pulled up right off the bat here. This goes in several phases here. The first thing you do is tell us what municipality you're reporting for, your name, your title, your phone. The crucial one here is your email. You've got a little CAPTCHA to solve. We then send you an email with a link to update the codes. And I've got a walkthrough of that. I'm not going to go through that whole walkthrough today, but I'll just let you know that if you get in there and you have trouble with this situation, again, email me, reach out. We can help walk you through it. We've got a step-by-step guide with screenshots and highlights to tell you what to do, where to go, and how to do it. So I think that's the end for me. Hopefully, again, I didn't go over my time too far there. If anybody has any questions, I'll be sticking around today. Feel free to pop those questions into the chat or follow up with me on that email address listed there, cdb.buildingcodes, plural, @illinois.gov. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. And again, more baseline. We've got another Zoom poll question just for the audience. So had you heard of this newish public act? And Matt, would you please repeat the deadline for reporting? You made it sound like it was last year. We actually thought it was this year, but
yeah, technically the reporting deadline was June of last year. It was 180 days after the effective date of that public act, which would have been January of last year. And then January of this year would have been your time to comply with those new baseline minimums. So January 1st of 2025. And I'll clarify just so nobody thinks anything, we are required to make this information publicly available. We are not knocking on doors. There's no fines associated with this. We simply are trying to identify what municipalities and counties within the state now comply with the statute and which ones don't, and then they would be considered a non-building code jurisdiction.
Okay, well, I'm glad we can be informative on this meeting here. It looks like folks didn't know about that and they're certainly not sure. So hopefully that information was helpful. Again, dialogue with Matt in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time for questions, but if not, there's some great resources. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you for answering the poll. There's another one coming up. So thank you, Matt Paul. We can close that Zoom poll. There is another one to launch. And so while we can bring that next poll up while I introduce Matt Stolzbart. And then, so we're looking to see what edition of codes the IBC and the IRC your community is on. This is a two-part question, so you might just, if you're not familiar with it, there's a little gray bar for all of the participants on the side there. Scroll down to get to the other question as well. So we're trying to get a lot of information here. So thank you, Matt Paul. Matt Stolzbart is business rep for IBEW Local 134. He's going to talk about the Codes and Standards Committee for Cook County communities. Matt?
Thank you, Edith. Again, my name is Matt Stolzbart. I'm a business rep for IBEW Local 134. Today, I just do want to take a moment to highlight the inconsistency of code adoption in Cook County. IBEW Local 134's jurisdiction is focused specifically on Cook County, but we've seen it even further than Cook County. We've seen it statewide, and specifically the NEC. As electricians, we install, alter, and maintain to the NFPA 70, which is the official name for the NEC, the National Electrical Code. I do want to have a little bit of a moment to explain the NEC. I think some people don't understand how intense the process is, but the NEC is developed by the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Agency, which is a transparent consensus process. And what that process is it's updated every 3 years, reflecting new technology, safety data, and industry input. And it's been around since 1897. And every 3 years since 1897, for over 125 years, they have a code making panel, which they call, it's a committee. And it's individuals that represent a very diverse group, where they weigh in on public inputs, PIs, that anyone can submit. It could be myself, it could be anyone on this call, it could be your neighbor, it could be anybody from anywhere, where they feel there's a need for change in the NEC. And that's a great process because it's a very transparent process that's established through open dialogue, where you can track public inputs on the internet. You can necessarily see justification. You have to, if you reject a public input, you have to have justification. And the process, even if it is rejected, you have a moment for public comment and appeal. But through the whole process, there's 18 code making panels. Those code making panels are made up of electrical contractors, engineers, inspectors, labor unions, testing labs such as UL, utilities such as someone maybe from ComEd, manufacturers, insurance, and government agencies. At the end of the day, they want to make sure that everyone's opinion is heard. That way, there's no specific individual, entity, organization deciding what updates are going into the NEC. And that's really important because this diversity and this broad range of individual stakeholders in the electrical industry really helped develop the NEC. And it's been that way for, like I said, over 125 years. Myself, one thing that we're part of is the IBEW Local 134 Code and Standards Committee. Seeing the importance of our industry, ourselves, the four individuals part of the committee, two of them, George Mastardini, Chris Rawson, are part of the code making panels for the NEC. George participates in CMP4, which is Code Making Panel 4, which focuses on the renewable energies. One of the most highly motivated and moving portion of code making panels you'll see currently. That's the one with emerging technologies that is just taking off to a new world today. Chris Rawson focuses on CMP 14, which is more of your fiber optics and your broadband network cabling. Myself and Bob Hattie, there are other NFPA standards, the National Fire Protection Agency, which is a non-for-profit organization. The goal is to reduce risk of hazard and fire. Bob and myself participate in other NFPA standards. Specifically, Bob participates in NFPA 855, which is the standard for the installation of stationary energy storage systems. That being said, your lithium-ion batteries, such as your Tesla Powerwall or your Generic wall, that too is new technology we're seeing in our communities today that a lot of individuals aren't very familiar with, as far as, you know, plan reviewers, inspectors, building officials, or community development directors. But a little bit more about the NEC. Just looking at the 2026 NEC, which is coming out in the fall, there was just under 4,000 public inputs submitted. That being said, they take those public inputs and necessarily spread them around to the appropriate code making panels for them to weigh in the technical input, the data, the scientific knowledge, the building standards, how they relate, necessarily the industry best practices too. So they're making sure the merit is there. They go through them. It's thousands and thousands of hours of collaboration. And that's why it takes 3 years, because there's different steps throughout the process. But at the end of the day, they're putting out the most current standard that reflects the most current technologies we're seeing. Safety updates consistently every 3 years that we need to recognize, because they're on point. These are the industry leaders helping us establish protection for public with electricity. Necessarily, we always want to make sure that our infrastructure, our electrical systems are safe and free of shorts and faults. That being said, the NEC is a model code. It's not law. You do not, if you see the NEC, it's not automatically enforced in your jurisdiction. It's only enforced in law when you adopt the NEC. So whether it be the 2015, the 2011, or the 2014, 2011, the most current one currently is 2023 NEC, NFPA 70. In the fall, we're coming out with another edition, which would be the 2026. And there's already a significant movement to the 2029 NEC because of total restructure. The structure of the NEC hasn't been changed in, over probably 100 years. Now they're taking all the articles and sections and restructuring them, which is going to create a lot of confusion even more. That being said, once a municipality adopts the NEC, they also can make local modifications, amendments, where they see what fits best for a municipality. And that falls into something that we saw as Illinois is a home rule state. Municipalities have the opportunity to adopt codes, building and safety standards as they see fit for their municipality. Matt, I want to just piggyback off of what Matt Paul said. They're starting to create a little bit, or bridge the gap a little bit, where they're not having to necessarily adapt to a statewide code, but they have a baseline code they need to follow. And the NEC also needs to be followed similarly. Now, not by law, but it still needs to be looked at as a code that needs to be updated, because as it evolves every 3 years, the safety updates are there to protect person and property from electrical hazard. And as a home rule state, we know a lot of municipalities out there aren't always aligned. So in Cook County alone, we have 134 municipalities. Each municipality has an opportunity to adopt its own cycle or year of the NEC. And I just want to make a point we had here. I put some information together, and I want to show how necessarily inconsistent Cook County's code adoption is across the entirety. So we saw that 1996, we had a municipality enforcing the 96 NEC. We have one on the 99 NEC. We have one on the 2002 NEC. Right there, that's almost 30 years of safety updates that have not been acknowledged, because we're on the 23, going swiftly to the 26, and they're that far behind. They have no reflection on the emerging technologies that in 2017, Article 706, which is energy storage systems, that's your lithium-ion battery, that's your power Tesla walls. There is no installation methods or enforcement for these codes. They might fall back into the battery section of articles in the NEC, and that's more lead acid-based concepts and installations. That's not reflecting the technology you're seeing today, which is something that we need to make sure that we have a very defined line on inspection, where we need to be appropriately inspecting to the most current standards. But tracking back, we have 10 municipalities on 2005. We have 5 on the 2008. We have 7 on the 2011. We have 16 municipalities in Cook County on 2014. We have 27 municipalities on the 2017. Something that we do in Chicago, we have our own electrical code, the 2018 Chicago Electrical Code, which is based on the 2017 NEC. This code is its own published document with its own stringent standards, unique with its own unique interpretations, a little more stringent code requirements more than what the NEC is. Again, local municipalities can make amendments to the NEC as they see fit. But again, we have 27 municipalities on the Chicago 2018 Chicago Electrical Code. There's one municipality on the 99 Chicago Electrical Code, 25 on the 2020 NEC, and we have currently 13, 2 coming up very soon to be compliant with the 2023 NEC. So let's just look, 13 municipalities in Cook County out of 134 are enforcing the current NEC that reflect the most current technologies. Everyone else is missing the appropriate safety updates that are required for inspection, enforcement, installation, alteration, and maintenance. It's a significant issue. What I also like to point out is Cook County itself has its own electrical code. Of recent, they just made their amendments and have adopted a broad variety of amendments that needed to be added to their amendments to reflect the current technologies. Now, with that said, that's pretty significant inconsistency, right? And we're seeing a lot of municipalities enforcing outdated codes, because if you're not on the most current code, you're on the outdated code that doesn't have the most technology. Some individual municipalities think the 2023 are the most current code. They need to work out the kinks, they say. That's not true. There is industry leaders and experts that are developing the code consistently, cycle after cycle, to make sure there's no inconsistencies or safety hazards for the public or even the fire department when they have to interact with it, or any individual interacting with electricity. It's very important. Now, we've gotten some conversation with other entities and organizations about statewide code adoption. So let's talk just very briefly about statewide code adoption. It's great on the surface, and we've seen that. But let's take a moment and look at our neighbors. Let's look at Indiana. Currently, Indiana's statewide code adoption for the NEC is 2008. That's not even close. And it's creating a significant issue on how inspectors are enforcing and inspecting electrical systems with the current technology we're seeing with EV charging stations, EV infrastructure, solar panels, smart homes. We're seeing technology change significantly from 2008 to today, and it's continuing to advance. The next technology, probably hydrogen. Are we prepared for hydrogen? I don't think so. I don't think right now we are, but we're preparing for today and we're trying to be prepared for tomorrow at the same time. So statewide adoption too may not necessarily be the answer, because if we look at Wisconsin, they're on the 2017 NEC. When the new NEC comes out in the fall, the 26th, they're almost 10 years behind the most current code. So
But
again,
I'm sorry to give you a 2-minute warning if I could, or minute here. Whenever you can wrap up would be great.
yeah. So at the end of the day, Local 134 Codes and Standards Committee has stepped up to necessarily provide guidance, education, and training to any municipality in Cook County free of charge. We want you to reach out. We want to sit down. We'll bring all the educational material we have. We have a binder with checklists. We also bring the 2018 Chicago Electrical Code with us. We bring the 2023 NEC currently. We bring the standard NFPA 855, because that standard is the installation method for stationary energy storage systems. And we also bring the IFC, because all of us together as electricians have to make sure we're compliant to all codes, not just the NEC, and all codes are relevant to our installation methods. With that, I think Edith might be able to put my email address on the chat, and we could go ahead, and if anyone wants to reach out to us to have us come to your community, we'd be more than happy to. But lastly, I just want to talk very briefly on the Electrical Commission. So at the end of the day, when you adopt and you are compliant with the most current code, how do you continue to evolve and adopt the most current code within your municipality? That's through an electrical commission. So in the Illinois Municipal Code 1137-2, it is required to have an electrical commission in your municipality if you're inspecting electrical systems. Also, I'd like to make mention there's 6 individuals that are part of the electrical commission. And again, it's a diverse group. You have usually an electrical contractor, electrical journeyman, you have the electrical inspector for the municipality, you have the fire representative, a engineer, registered engineer, and a representative from the utility company. For ComEd, that would be the Cook County area. Other portions of the state of Illinois is Ameren. But with that being, they have the opportunity to meet as needed to make sure that the code adoption process continues year after year. They make determinations and they make recommendations to the city council or board, village council or board, that the process of code adoption for the NEC needs to continue. They also make rules and regulations on installation and material, the permitting process, inspection fees, but they make sure the municipality has electrical safety throughout with the electrical commission. And I don't want to take too much more time. I think I'm coming close, but again, if anyone wants to reach out to us, please feel free. If they can just throw my email in the chat, that'd be great. And I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Matt. And if there's time, you'll come back at the end and tell us about some success stories. Thank you so much for that. We're happy to turn it over to an old friend who works with us a lot on the IBEW task force, and that's Jeanette Lazaks, who is the Director of Research and Innovation at Slipstream.
Hi, everybody. I think you should be able to see my screen now.
Correct.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Remind me, I'm gonna shoot for 5 to 10 minutes here. I have a lot to cover.
Okay.
But like Edith said, I'm Director of Research and Innovation at Slipstream. Slipstream is a nonprofit with a mission to accelerate climate solutions. I am joined in partnership with MEEA, Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, Illinois Green Alliance, and of course the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I'm going to be talking actually a little bit more about what we call advanced building policies. I know Edith actually mentioned this in some of the introduction, but with the statewide law of CEJA, there is an opportunity for all municipalities in Illinois to adopt stretch codes. So what we've been talking about is typically to this moment, we've been talking mostly about the base energy codes or base codes in general. There is when we talk about energy codes, we're really talking about policies that require municipalities or buildings to adopt a base energy efficiency. Stretch codes takes us one step level up to essentially say we're gonna we're going to adopt a little bit more efficient buildings. We're going to adopt codes that require a little bit more decarbonization technologies. And that is what actually is available to adopt right now by all municipalities as of January 1st, 2024. I'm not actually going to go into any details necessarily right now about what goes into that stretch code. We can leave that to another time. But I will also mention there's a policy that we talk about, which addresses existing buildings. So stretch codes, of course, are energy codes that are for new construction. Benchmarking and building performance standards are policies that use reporting and improvements to gradually reduce energy use in existing and commercial and multifamily buildings. These are two policies that municipalities can work towards and can adopt to help meet overall climate and energy goals. So what we've been doing for the last several years is in this territory and basically in ComEd territory, we've been supported through the ComEd, their emerging technology program. We've been working with municipalities essentially to talk to them about adoption and implementation of these advanced building policies. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but we know that there's a lot of barriers to adopting some of these policies. And yet we know that municipalities are very interested in both stretch energy codes and benchmarking and building performance standards because they are ways to meet energy and climate goals. What we've been doing over the last several years is helping create tools and trainings that can be used to support both the adoption and the implementation of these policies. I mentioned that we're being supported by ComEd. The other piece of this, a very important piece of this, is we are providing feedback and guidance to the utility to understand what role they can play in both compliance and implementation. So we'll talk about that in a second, but there's a lot that they can do. You probably already know that there are utility incentive programs for different technologies. Utilities want to know what can they do to support these policies to make sure that they are successful. Like I mentioned, we're in partnership with the MEEA, Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, Illinois Green Alliance. I just wanted to add, this is a survey we did a couple of years ago, but when we were asking municipalities, some of you on this call may have responded to this survey. We asked, what was your likelihood of adoption of stretch codes? And then we actually asked about building performance standards. We won't spend a lot of time here except to say that there's a lot of folks on this, the right side, which is the not sure or not considering adopting these policies. Our goal of this project is to move this a little bit to the left to make sure we are exploring these, breaking down barriers, and working towards adoption. So what are these challenges? I'm not going to go through these in any real detail. We're short on time, but there is a lot of pushback from the building community on some of these policies. We understand that municipalities have limited resources. There's a lot of different priorities, this may not be top of mind. Related to that, there's sometimes a lack of awareness on energy benefits of efficient building upgrades. People may have misconceptions about cost or application or operations. And certainly there's financial obstacles from both those that are implementing it, the municipalities that are implementing it, to the people that are doing the actual construction and retrofits. So what we would try to do is actually work to break down some of these barriers. There are things that we are doing that happen before the policy adoption. We call it advancement or advocacy. There's things that we can do after policy adoption, so with the compliance or implementation. We, as a part of this project team, have been doing a lot of these pieces. So I'm just going to highlight a few. We have been working with several municipalities in the ComEd territory on policy support. We've been looking at sometimes their building data to estimate savings. We've been presenting at town halls or different meetings within code committees. we're doing additional research. This is starting now. We also have several trainings. We are developing code books, field guides, compliance checklists, and supporting it in different ways related to essentially municipality support, so that giving municipalities a little bit of a foot up in terms of having an extra set of arms or eyes. We are talking to ComEd more and more about financial incentives that align with the policy. And then we're continuing to develop BPS and benchmarking compliance documentation tools. What does this all look like? We have fact sheets that sometimes, this was actually developed a couple of years ago, but we've, developing these fact sheets that are meant to educate both the municipality staff, but also the public or stakeholders or those in the building community. We're recently developing these compliance checklists meant for building code officials or somebody that may want to know, okay, what do I actually need to do to comply with these policies? This is specific to stretch code. And then we're, what are the, for those that are trying to figure out, should we adopt these stretch energy codes? We also have a comparison. What does it look like compared to the Illinois Energy Code, the 2021 IECC? What is that, the base code compared to the stretch energy code? These are tools that we hopefully, we've been using across different communities. If you haven't seen them, we are happy to share them. And some of them are actually on the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus website. We are developing another website through the through Illinois Green Alliance. Stay tuned. But if you haven't seen these and you want to, take a look at them or talk to us some more, feel free to reach out. I will say this is actually a training that we conducted last year in Oak Park. And here are our friends at MEEA providing an overview of the stretch code. We could do this, and we are doing this continually throughout this year in different communities around the area. I just wanted to shout out to Evanston because they are the first city in Illinois to adopt both the stretch energy code, which goes into effect in October, and then also their building performance standard. They've had a benchmarking ordinance in place for a few years. They call their building performance standard the Healthy Building Ordinance, and it just recently passed. I think I might be up with in my time, but feel free to contact or reach out either through chat here or through this email, and I'm happy to provide additional information.
Well done. Thank you, Jeanette. You really crammed a lot into the few minutes, and apologies for running out of time. We knew we had so much to talk about, and people are so passionate about this. So more resources. We are going to introduce next Ann McKibben, who's just, one of the groups looking at supporting municipalities and adopting codes and innovating. Ann McKibben is the vice president at the Accelerate Group, a strategic and consulting innovation firm. Ann, and please feel free to dialogue in the chat with our speakers. Sorry, we don't have time for questions.
Hi, thank you so much, Edith. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Again, thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate it. And now I'm gonna, oh dear. There we go. Great. So I'm Ann McKibben, as Edith said, and I'm with the Accelerate Group. We are a consultant to the Illinois Finance Authority in their capacity as the Illinois Climate Bank. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some new resources that the Illinois Finance Authority has that may be helpful to your municipalities. We're very happy that Illinois has won a Solar for All grant. Illinois also won a climate pollution reduction grant. And both of these grants include some components for resources to help with code adoption. So I'm going to talk about those today. The first one, we have a notice of funding opportunity that we just went up on Friday. We'll have a 30-day open window. I've put a link in the slide, and I can put that in the chat too. Let's see. And this funding opportunity would be for municipalities who are interested in adopting something called Solar App Plus. Solar App Plus is a no-cost permitting software developed by the National Renewable Energy Lab to streamline solar permitting. Of course, the software is no cost, but as we all know, implementing something like this is costly. So these grants are for municipalities to assist them with those costs. It's for up to $30,000. We hope to do up to 10 of them. And the funding can also be used. We heard a lot of really great feedback from Metro Mayor's Caucus and stakeholders that there might be municipalities who are interested in this, but they don't have codes currently in place that are up to date enough to support Solar App Plus. So we've allowed that to be one of the uses for the grant, is if you want to adopt Solar App Plus, but you also need to update your electrical code, you can certainly use this funding for that. Again, the NOFO is currently out. It's on the Illinois Finance Authority's website. There's links there under the Solar for All program. And I will put this in, let me just see if I can, no. Well, I'll get it in the chat. The second resource I wanted to tell you about is coming soon. It's not out yet, but this is some work we're helping with the Illinois EPA to implement, and that is a stretch code adoption grant. Similarly, these grants will be larger. There's more funding there. But similar to Solar App Plus, we heard some folks might be interested in the stretch code, but their base codes right now is just too big of a jump. So this funding could go for municipalities who are interested in putting staff time and resources towards adopting a stretch code, but maybe if they need to, update base codes first in some way to get them closer to that goal. We hope to have this application up in May for an open window that would go into June, and then funding as soon as possible after that. Let's see here. The third opportunity, also coming soon, hope to have this up by hopefully maybe next week, certainly hopefully this month. This is a little tangential to codes, but it gets to the solar aspects of energy work in municipalities. And these are grants for residential solar outreach. Municipalities will be, and nonprofits would be the folks that we are targeting these towards. I think it might be of particular interest to municipalities who have existing housing programs, like home repair programs. The idea here is for staff time to work with communities to help low-income residents move through the existing Illinois Solar for All residential solar programs, which do take, it takes a lot of work to get through that program. And so folks need help. And if municipalities are working with those communities already around home repairs, it may be a really good fit. So take a look. It should be out by the end of the month at the latest, as I'm crossing my fingers by saying that. And lastly, the Illinois Finance Authority has other resources for municipalities. Some of those will go towards grid resilience and be focused on municipal utilities, and there are other financing programs here, which I won't go into any detail, but hopefully you'll see the slide and have that information available to you. So those are the things that are coming up at the Illinois Finance Authority, and some resources that should be available soon or are currently available to assist municipalities in updating their codes and related sort of programs. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me or email federal funding at ill.fa@financeauthority.com. Also, my colleague Claire Brindley's information is here. She is the program manager at the Finance Authority. And let's see, great.
We do have a Zoom poll question just in response to the information that Anne presented. Please let us know if you're interested in these grant programs.
Thanks so much, everyone. I'll get that NOFO link in the Zoom here in the chat here in just a moment. And please, along with my email, please feel free to reach out if I can be helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne. Okay, everybody's doing great on time. We probably will have some time for questions. Can leave this poll up for a second here. We'll go back to Matt Stolzbart to talk about community success stories. And if Matt, you can condense that down to a few minutes, we'll be able to open it up for conversation or questions. So Matt, back to you. You were going to talk about how communities collaborate to update and align their codes.
Yes, thank you. Just recently, we worked with a community where they were moving their NEC electrical code from the 2011 to the 2023 NEC. We were helping develop their amendments along with kind of a little bit of an education and training situation where we had to make sure that they understood the implications of going a drastic change, where they need to make sure that the community, contractors, inspectors, and everyone understands what they need to be looking at for compliance moving forward. With that, we spent a lot of time with them, and just so happened that the municipality next door also was looking to adopt and update their building or NEC specifically. And we ended up working collaboratively, two communities right next door to each other, and they took the information, we worked together, and we were able to get a code adoption process with two municipalities working together, collaborating, because at the end of the day, the inspectors were seeing the same contractors, the same general contractors, electrical contractors installing electrical systems and building in both communities. And they were going back and forth necessarily where one electrical contractor would say, well, they allow me to do it over here. And they knew well that it wasn't really the truth, but now they're both aligned and they can both work together to inspect and permit and plan review. It was a great experience. They were very happy. We came in, we sat down, we spent months on end working through their amendments and kind of providing some training. And they're moving to the 2023 NEC currently, and they're about to finish through with the legal aspect of it, and they're going to adopt. And then another point I'd like to make mention is Cook County Electrical Code. IBEW Local 134 Codes and Standards Committee helped facilitate the amendments. They've just recently adopted a whole slew of new amendments that reflect the most current code, the 2023 NEC, headed by George Mastardini. And that is a significant update for Cook County as a whole, because we have so many unincorporated portions of Cook County that now they are able to enforce and inspect to the most compliant standards. Again, if anyone's looking for any help on education guidance or code adoption, we're available at any time.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, great job, everybody. So we're going to have time for questions because there's a lot of people on this call, and I'm sure people have thoughts. So if you want to get started and populate the chat with some questions you might have or comments for our speakers, we have one more Zoom poll to get your feedback on. This is about seeking assistance. So if we can launch that poll. We're also looking for any other success stories. If you have worked with another community or you've got technical assistance and you have a great story you want to share about getting current on codes, we'd love to hear about it. So here we'd like to find out if you'd like to update your codes and if you want some technical assistance. And then we'd also like to know if you've worked with any of our partners, many of whom who are on the call today, but other organizations, particularly the code officials organizations, if you've collaborated with any of those partners. You want to see what's already going on out there. And the last question, you keep scrolling through them. One of the last questions there, we had the idea of potentially working in cohorts. Mayor's Caucus has done a number of these cohorts. So it's a model that we see across municipal assistance. Notably, pre-Solar Act Plus, we had cohorts of communities that became Soul Smart, and then we now have EV Ready community cohorts. So would that idea make sense for the members of Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus to potentially collaborate in cohorts and have some of us organizing this call here seek funding to do that? So we'd like your thoughts on that as well. And then if I could invite the speakers, all of whom to, come back on with anything they didn't get a chance to say or to respond to other speakers, as well as we want to hear from the folks on this call, the audience, if there are questions, thoughts, follow up. Please, we left ourselves a few minutes for discussion here. Everybody talked really fast, so now we've got a little time, unless I'm missing a section. It feels like we're done. We've got time for feedback. Kim, you want to come off mute and ask that question?
Sure, thanks. It seems like every time we update the codes, the staff does a thorough review of our code and the new code and whatever updates there are. And I'm just wondering, since we're hearing that there's experts who are developing these code updates, how much do municipalities really need to review? Do they need to do a thorough review of these updates, every municipality, or can they just be adopted?
There's nothing that requires you to do that thorough of a review, but it typically depends on how many editions you're jumping. So if you're just going from an edition of something from 3 years prior to a current edition, there's going to be fewer changes, but there may still be major changes. And all of the codes published by the ICC, the International Code Council, usually right at the beginning, they've got a summarized list of the major changes in that code and in that edition. And you could simply review that if you'd like. But most municipalities do kind of like to get a feel for what's changing this year, what's happening with some of these new and emerging technologies and materials, and how do we want to address those maybe differently than how it's being addressed in this new current edition or something like that. I know Matthew also talked about the EV chargers. There was a lot of changes for rooftop gardens and solar applications and things like that over the years. And so, and likewise, there's a lot of municipalities that aren't as fond of sprinklering requirements for residential buildings. And so they make a lot of revisions to those kind of requirements. And so typically what happens is if you've made a revision one year, then you like to see how does that affect us in this new edition? What new codes or new requirements are there for something that we've maybe made adequate modifications to in the past, but now we need to extend those modifications to a new code section. Typically, there's some private party resources, and the ICC, I think, will usually do some presentations, and they typically do continuing education presentations for some of those updates and changes, so that you can spend an hour, get your whole team together, spend an hour, and just get a really good summary of what all has changed with the International Building Code this edition, or what has changed with the National Electric Code this edition. But I would say overall, it's recommended that you review those changes each time you're making a change. And the more additions that you're jumping, the more likely you'll have a lot more to kind of review and look over. So.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
I just would like to just quickly piggyback off of Matt a little bit. 100% agreed. So very specific for the NEC. There's every time a new code cycle comes out, let's say the 2026, there's an analysis of changes, they call it. And it's specific to that NEC that comes out. We've done groups, educational seminars last year. 2023 was the 2023 analysis of changes. We had 2 individual experts come out that are on code making panels and provide, because I know the building department needs to understand it, but also the electrical inspector, the enforcement category, the enforcement individual has to recognize, and again, we say it consistently, emerging technologies, but technology has advanced rapidly and it's continuing to advance rapidly, and the inspection category, the individuals that do it need to continue to educate themselves and train themselves. That's something we see municipalities not necessarily mandate, where they're mandating their electrical inspectors to get CEUs. Some of their licensures do require it and certifications, but there's no mandatory continuing education for the inspectors out there, which we believe something that we're doing is we're providing free education and guidance for these electrical inspectors to get up to date, to understand, because every change, whether it's the I family, the I codes, or the NEC, there's hundreds and hundreds of changes, some small, some huge, especially with emerging technologies when we're starting to see load calculations change with energy management systems. Just had a phone call yesterday about an individual inspector that's enforcing the 2020 NEC. Long story short, his conversation was based off the 2023 NEC representing Article 22070, which is service costs. I know it's very detailed information you're not familiar with, but you need to be familiar with every update, every code cycle that comes out for the NEC. Your electrical inspector should have some type of continuing education to understand what those changes are and how they affect your community.
And I'll only add, I know that when I'm talking about stretch energy codes, we're talking about a slightly different beast than what Matthew and Matt have talked about. But I will say that you're absolutely right that it does take a lot of, to make a decision to pass a stretch code, it does, you want to be thoughtful about it. I shared one of those resources about the comparison between the base energy code and the stretch energy code. Those are the types of resources that we want to be able to share, walk you through, to make sure you understand not only what you're getting into, but also to make it known that it's not as big of a deal, hopefully, to some municipalities. Like it is doable. These are technologies or operations or control systems that are manageable, doable for everybody right now. So we want to make sure everybody has a good sense of what's in the stretch energy code compared to the base code. And again, hopefully those kind of resources overcome that barrier, Councilmember Stone, that you mentioned, that, that is a big deal. And I know for Highland Park, for example, we provided a training to your codes committee or your code staff. And I think that was a helpful endeavor. So happy to do that in other places as well.
And I'm going to press our municipal members to speak up here. So again, lots of information. We asked the speakers to consolidate things just so that we'd have some opportunity to get some feedback. And we tried to be efficient in terms of pressing you on some of those Zoom poll questions. I'd like to just have some feedback from other municipalities on the call. There's a lot of groups here that want to help. There's a lot of barriers. We're all over the place. There's information that's confusing. We saw that on some of the early polls. It's really difficult just to keep up. What version of the code are you on? These key things keep changing. And then we've got this growing interest in helping municipalities. So please, let's go to gallery view and see if anybody else wants to raise their hand, speak up, ask questions, make comments.
Well, I'll ask another question if no one else has a question. How long does it typically take? Does it take months? Does it take weeks to review, say, the stretch code for adoption? What's your estimate?
Yeah, Allison, do you want to, you just unmuted. Allison, do you want to add to that? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think it really depends on the municipality and the level of rigor that they want to go through it. However, I'll just say, to Jeanette's point of the resources that we've developed, I think we've made it really, for lack of a better word, because this is not a very good word to describe codes, but we've made it really simple to see the differences between, like we have a comparison for the 2021, which is the current Illinois code. We have a comparison with the 2024, which is the upcoming Illinois code, and all of those to the stretch code. So, and the main difference excuse me, the main differences is really in the efficiency and then in the readiness components that are in the stretch code. So it could be very easy. It could be, easy. It could take one meeting, I would say a couple of hours. However, we have been working with some communities where we've had multiple meetings to go over multiple aspects of the code. So I think it can depend on the level of trust that the people that are doing the review have with the materials that they're given to look at. And maybe even just the level of time that they want to spend on it. But we're happy to spend as much time as it takes. I'll just say that we don't have a limit, but we are trying to make it as again, simple as we can, and as maybe straightforward is a better word for it, to make it more clear what the actual differences are. And I'll also just say this, I think the nice thing about the stretch code is that the next versions of the stretch code are going to be very similar to each other. They're just going to increase in efficiency. And I think that will be more straightforward than like most of the code changes that happen at the state level, because those are following national codes. Those changes, sometimes they'll decide to rewrite, the entire structure of the code, for example. That will not be happening with the stretch code. And I think that will be nice for municipalities, because then the updates will be a lot more straightforward in the next coming years when those get updated.
I'll just kind of echo another point there too. We see a varying amount of involvement from different municipalities, typically based on just the size of the municipality and the resources they have within their structure, their employee structure. If you have a fire safety division with multiple inspectors and a chief, and you have a building code official with multiple inspectors underneath them, and everybody kind of in-house, you have a lot more people coming to the table, a lot more people who have input, who have concerns, and that can draw that process out sometimes. But from my opinion, rightfully so. You have a lot more people who have invested interest within that decision and those changes. Smaller municipalities, where we're talking about a village board of 6 people, and who may not even have a website in some cases, they make their code adoptions like this. They call the lawyer, they go, they come down and they swap out the number in the municipal code and it's done. And the problem with that sometimes is that, then their local inspector, if they have one, may not actually be familiar with the changes that are going to be enforceable now. And so, obviously I think a little bit more involvement and investment is the ideal approach. But in theory, yeah, there's a whole team of people. There's a whole team of people in multiple organizations and state bodies and things that come together to generate things like the stretch code and our Illinois baseline codes. ICC goes through a whole process every time they make changes. I know NFPA does too. They have boards and commissions and public hearings and all kinds of things when they go to make these changes. And so, there's a lot of knowledgeable people that take part in generating the codes. You could, in theory, just adopt them as is. But I think the main thing for that time it takes for a municipality is educating your people on what changes are coming and what changes are actually needing to be enforced and implemented in your municipality, real time for you. So sometimes municipalities like to get input from their community members as well, building organizations, the laborers union, things like that for, hey, we're looking at adopting this code and it's got these changes in it. What do you guys think? Because there's nothing worse than you make some adoptions and changes and then all of a sudden the whole community is in uproar about something that, maybe wasn't even discussed or considered because you weren't aware it was even there. So, but there's a lot of resources. There really are within the state to help with this. I know we've got a lot of good resources on the call today for people who have materials in place, people who have expertise and can provide that kind of assistance. So.
Thanks. I particularly like Cheryl's question there, just about barriers to adopting and current codes, enforcing current codes. And thank you, Carolyn, for your thoughts on that. If anyone else wants to, just kind of jump on that. What are some of the barriers? We have to say for the IBEW committee, we've polled communities a lot to find out what the barriers are to stretch code, but let's just talk barriers in general. We really want to understand that. Again, there are resources, new grant programs here, utility investments, technical assistance. The unions are here to help. What would help? What are the barriers? Carolyn, do you want to explain your comment? Pretty self-explanatory, but.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just didn't know how to do it too much because this isn't really my area, and I don't really spend a lot of time in this area. But when we do talk about the updated codes that are needed to be done, building codes, some of the pushback that we do get is the fact that these standards make the cost of production higher, which increases the cost of the construction. The house itself becomes higher. And that makes it harder for people to afford housing and so on. And yet I know that there's a long-term benefit in terms of energy efficiencies that actually in the long run helps them have lower energy costs, which can offset some of that higher upfront cost. So I think that can kind of get tricky when we have our conversations.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Thanks, Carolyn. I will say I feel like cost is by far the biggest barrier, or at least perceived barrier, of adopting more advanced codes or stretch energy codes. I think it would be interesting to see what these recent increases in prices. I mean, I know that housing prices are increasing as of late, and we can imagine that who knows exactly what's going to happen with the economy right now, but there is a question of affordability of housing. I will say that based on some research that we've done and others have done, for example, the Pacific Northwest National Lab, who looks at model energy codes and tries to estimate cost, there is a return on investment. And as you mentioned, I think, Carolyn, there is a savings that people see when they live in a house that is more energy efficient. And what we can talk about at another time, but we have to pull together resources. But that question of cost is a big one, and compared to the rest of the affordability issues that are of labor, of materials, the energy code portion is relatively small. So happy to expand on that more. I know that we've talked about it through the IBEW meetings, and happy to continue the conversation with anybody else. So it always comes up, though.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And we'll wrap. Thank you so much to the speakers again. Incredibly content rich presentations today. Good discussion. So thank you to both Matthews, to Anne, and then Jeanette for participating, as well as Allison and Grant, who have been coaching from the background. Kim, for your excellent questions, and everyone else for your participation in the Zoom polls and questions. Just a reminder, Cheryl, you want to talk about what will go on the website and the resources that we have currently? Just a reminder where everything goes.
Yes, so this will be on the Environment Committee webpage. When you click on the link that goes to this meeting, you'll have all of the resources that the speakers have shared. And you can, get to the Capital Development Board website. You can get to the grant opportunity at the IFA website. And so that will all be there so that it's easy to find within a week.
And our IBEW task force is ongoing. If you are interested in participating in that and doing a deeper dive, it stands for Advanced Building Energy Efficiency Policies, which is stretch code and building performance standards. We still welcome participation in that. That project will go on for the rest of the year through technical assistance. And then we look forward to seeing you again next month. A very different topic. So our May meeting will be on repair cafes, and that's May 20th, 9:30 to 11 virtual. And we've got all the repair cafes that are organized in the Chicago region to keep things out of the landfill and keep products in use. events, we'll be presenting. We'll have a good discussion about getting those started. So thank you all for being here. Enjoy Earth Day and Arbor Day next week. Earth Day being the 22nd, Friday, the last Friday in April being Arbor Day. I hope many of you have good participation for community events in your communities. Get some good work done, and thanks for being here.